Now we come to hydrocyanic acid poisoning. HCN poisoning, chronic would cause hypothyroidism, whereas acute would cause respiratory distress. So I'll not dwell into details because the basic things you all know. These are some of the plants which are rich in hydrocyanic acid. Again, HCN poisoning is more common in young plants. So young growing plants will accumulate a lot of hydrocyanic acid, and if it is consumed in large quantities, then there is poisoning. But if it is consumed in less quantities, and if microflora is not able to manage this HCN glycosides, then in that case you have chronic poisoning. Now, detecting cyanide in plants. Again, this is an old, picric acid test, which we have been taught. But there is also one more test that has come in, that has been claimed to be much superior than picric acid, and it's called as a Figel-Angel paper method. Now, in this, it is the same, kind of picric acid kind of test only, where you have to put a drop of the material on, or generally what is done is, as I have shown you in the test tube, you can take the plant material which is suspected of having HCN, and then just put your paper along with the cork, and then wait for some time, and then if there is hydrocyanic acid, then this paper will be showing a different chocolate color, and that will tell you whether there is an HCN poisoning. So about HCN, again I'll not go into details because you all know that this is very easy to diagnose, because there is what is called as a cherry red blood, and then you have a lot of dyspnea, excitement, sometimes even convulsions. Many times there is confusion between cyanide poisoning and nitrate poisoning, because symptoms are more or less same, and therefore you have to look at the blood which is drawn. So if you look at the blood which is drawn, in case of nitrate poisoning, as I have already said, the blood is cherry colored, whereas in case of HCN poisoning, once you take out the blood and once it is exposed to air for some time, it becomes cherry red exposure. So that is the differentiating feature which you can quickly do at the field. Chronic cyanide poisoning will cause goiter. It will also cause cystitis, ataxia, as well as abortions are common. Then repeat breeding is also common, and there is a lot of now literature available on cyanide poisoning, especially chronic cyanide poisoning, because of plant material as well as because of environmental contamination. And I think all the vets should consider, especially those vets who are working in industrial area, they should also be aware as to what kind of pollutants and what kind of factories are there. Could there be any accident where there would be release of such obnoxious material, and what is going to be their effect on animals? And you should be ready with the kit, treatment kit, because at the last moment you just cannot go around running and trying to get the drugs for treatment. So you got to have in every dispensary a kit where depending upon the kinds of poisons that are you are likely to get in that area, all the antidotes and supportive material is available at hand, because you have to act immediately once the cases start coming to you. Now, treatment of hydrocyanic acid poisoning, there is one more inhaler that is available, is called as an amyl nitrite. This amyl nitrite can be pushed as an inhalant, and it acts very quickly. So that is what usually they do in humans, especially in children. As soon as they get large number of people getting affected and coming to the hospital, they will start giving amyl nitrate as inhalation to take care of immediately, because this is absorbed immediately, and then the HCN effects will be starting reducing. Then sodium nitrite is another injection along with sodium thiosulfate. So this is what we have been taught in the colleges, that this is the antidote. But now we know that both sodium nitrite as well as sodium thiosulfate also has a lot of other effects, like it also causes especially sodium nitrate has been found to cause hypotension. Another problem is sodium nitrate also act very slowly, and and after injection, usually they say that it takes about 30 minutes to 35 minutes for the release of hydrocyanic from the hemoglobin and oxyhemoglobin to be formed, and you can't wait for that long period of time. So there is another compound that is available in the market, which is commonly used in case of human, and that is called 4-dimethyl aminophenol. So these are all aminophenol. It's also called as a DMAP, and this is used at the dose rate of 3.25 milligram. The advantage of this particular compound is that you get 30% methemoglobin within 10 minutes. So all cyanoglobin, will be converted to methemoglobin, immediately in 30 minutes, and then you can follow it up by, giving sodium nitrite as well as, sodium thiosulfate to take care of, methemoglobin. Another compound that is available is called hydroxylamine, which is again used in case of cyanide poisoning. And in case of human nowadays, they're using sodium nitrite plus DMAP or sodium nitrite plus HA combinedly. So this will bring down the dose of sodium nitrite. So the problem of hypotension, will be reduced. And then you can also have, quick conversion into methemoglobin and then oxyhemoglobin. And then thiosulfate, can be given 100 to 500 gram orally also. If you find that, there is still cyanide, containing glycosides in rumen, so you can give this orally. So orally it will bind to the glycosides and decrease. Now, chlorpromazine is known to be significantly potentiate the efficacy of sodium nitrate and sodium thiosulfate. So suppose if those other compounds which I have mentioned are not available to you, you can use sodium nitrate and sodium thiosulfate, but also use largactil along with, so that the conversion of conversion to methemoglobin will be much faster. Diltiazem, naloxone, these are all the drugs which you can use, for bringing the respiration to normal, because in this case there is a lot of respiratory distress. Another antidote which is also very commonly used in human and then it should also be tried in animals is hydroxycobalamin. This is vitamin B12A, not vitamin B12. Vitamin B12 is different. This is a precursor of vitamin B12. Now, injections of this particular provitamin B12 is also available in market, and what it does, it binds to cyanide ion and gets converted into vitamin B12. So you are injecting a precursor and getting it converted to vitamin B12, which is useful to the animal. Similarly, there are chelators like cobalt editate, that is also available as antidote for ACN poisoning. Oxalate poisoning, again, it's very common in case of animals, and this poisoning occurs again both due to high oxalate content. So there are two sides to oxalate poisoning. One is, you have forages and plant material which are rich in oxalate because of certain soil factors and because of weather factors, and the cropping pattern in which you follow. And the second is contamination of the forages and fodder, especially straws, with mycotoxins. And a lot of these mycotoxins like aspergillus would have oxalate content. And therefore the oxalate toxicity can occur indirectly because of this fungus contamination. Rice straw is one of the important factor causing oxalate, because the oxalate content of rice straw is very high. And number two, especially those friends who are from Konkan region, they should listen to this, that rice straw is very common over there, and if rice straw gets contaminated with with rains, moisture, if there is unseasonal rains, and then rice straw becomes wet, then you find these mycotoxins growth very luxuriantly. And these mycotoxins, which are black in color like in a powder, they are the one which contains a lot of oxalate, and then oxalate poisoning would happen. I still remember lots of cases I have seen in Konkan region, and I'm still not convinced that the cases which usually is regarded as enterotoxemia or botulism are because of those. I still suspect those to be oxalate poisoning, because if you give treatment with calcium, you will find there is there is good recovery. Napier Bajra hybrid, this again, I would like to emphasize this particular fodder here, because this is becoming very common. there are a lot of hybrid Napiers which are coming up in the market, and there are multi-cut varieties. Now, all these varieties, which are derived from bajra, are very high in oxalate, as high as around 4%. And this oxalate contents becomes high after first cut. So after first cut, the second cut would have higher oxalate, third cut would have still higher oxalate. And if you are not following the age of harvesting properly, if you are aging it, if you are not harvesting the second cut, third cut, and fourth cut at the right time, and if you are delaying the harvest, then you are likely to have more of oxalate. Secondly, if you are feeding it as it is, then animals are likely to have oxalate poisoning. But if you are converting this into silage, then the oxalate effect will be reduced. So these are some of the common plants which are known to be rich in oxalate content. So again, oxalate by itself, rumen has got a lot of capacity to metabolize oxalate. So normally oxalate will not be, you should not have any problem if you're feeding oxalate. It becomes a problem only in two situations. One, where you have started suddenly feeding lots of oxalate without giving microflora to adjust to the new feed. And number two, where your microflora is damaged, and then you are not having the growth of the right kind of bacteria which will take care of this oxalate. So in both the cases, we will have problem. Now, oxalate toxicity, again, signs are again acute. Acute toxicity signs are just exactly like hypocalcemia. You see, tremors, then you have excitement, then animals is showing tetanic signs, sit down, lateral recumbency, sternal recumbency. So very classical. And I have seen cases with oxalate poisoning where calcium level goes down to 4 milligram per deciliter, 3 milligram per deciliter. And one of the tests which I usually do for oxalate poisoning in field is coagulation test. So I just take out blood in a while and watch it for coagulation. If it doesn't coagulate by 12 minutes, then I would think that there is a problem related with calcium. And if you want to really confirm it, just put 1 drop of calberol or myfix which you are having, and if it immediately coagulates, then you know that it's a problem related with calcium, and you can with oxalate, and you can give calcium to take care of that. About this Napier hybrid, the point to emphasize here is ages plants have more oxalate, and therefore if you are having multi-cut varieties, please be sure, and at least for once, all these new varieties that have come up with hybrid Napier, you should check for oxalate contents at various cuts, and then find out the right age at which these hybrid Napiers are to be cut and fed to the animals. Treatment here is again calcium borogluconate, but problem with calcium borogluconate is you are giving calcium borogluconate just to temporarily take care of serum calcium, but most of the calcium will be excreted. So you will have to depend on dicatonic calcium to be given. Dicatonic calcium can be given intramuscular, and it is released slowly, and its assimilation absorption is higher. You can also give oral calcium, and as I have said, calcium borogluconate, if you want to give half IV and give half subcutaneously to maintain absorption for a longer period of time. Then another thing is thiamine is also known to be effective in case of oxalate poisoning. Magnesium sulfate orally you can give, so that you can get rid of the oxalate. Oxalate also binds to calcium and magnesium. So if there is any residual oxalate in rumen, it will bind to magnesium and calcium which you are giving orally. Then enough of hydration, so that the oxalate crystals which you are likely to have in kidneys, and as well as oxalic acid in blood circulation, that you will be taking care of, and replace rumen microflora, as I have said earlier. Lastly, I will just touch upon lead poisoning in brief. This is not a very common, but sometimes you do get in stray cows that the cow was roaming around, and then it leaked some batteries, leaked grease or machinery, some kind of material which is rich in lead, and then immediately it starts showing certain signs. Especially people use paint, and then if this paint is discarded, the tins of the paints are discarded. Especially those leaded paints would have very high lead content, and would be the cause of poisoning. So These are the clinical signs. Most the clinical signs are very, very, diagnostic. I usually look at, whether animal is able to see. There is a kind of blindness. The pupil is open. The animal's, eyes appear to be wide open, but it's not able to see. There is depression, and then there is, diarrhea, which is blackish in color, and animal will start, occasionally, with abdominal, contractions, will try to pass feces, which is, black in color. Then you have, muscle tremors and convergence. Now, as far as treatment is concerned for lead poisoning, antidote is, dimercaprol, that is the BAL. You have to give 4 milligram per kg body weight. Now, BAL treatment in case of lead poisoning, a prolonged kind of treatment, because you have lead which is deposited in different tissues. So you would like to get rid of the lead which is deposited. Otherwise, you will have recurrence if you are not giving repeatedly. So usually the line of action here is you give 4 milligram per kg body weight. You repeat every 4 to 6 hours first day. Second day, you can repeat at around 8 to 12 hours, and third day again, at least once in a day. So this you should carry out for at least 5 to 7 days. Then you will be able to get rid of the lead which is accumulated. Then drenching of small amounts of magnesium sulfate is again helpful, because magnesium will also bind to the lead, and it will also cause laxation. So the lead which is accumulated in the rumen gastrointestinal tract would be released. Then editate calcium disodium is another chelating agent which is used in lead poisoning, even in human. And this can be given deep intramuscular. So this will replace lead, will release lead for excretion from its reservoirs. So this is all I wanted to talk to you about different poisonings in case of ruminant. What I have done is also I have created a corner in www.indiancattle.com, which is a poisoning helpline. So there we will be having a reservoir, or can say inventory of all the material which is required for accessing by the vets. So if you want a quick access to find out what could be the poison, what is the diagnosis, what kind of diagnosis you want to compare with the standard chart, you want to find out what are the drugs which are available, where it is available, the phone numbers and other things, all those things will be available at this site. This is a charitable site. It's a non-profitable venture by Bombay Gorakshak Trust, and you are most welcome to visit this site and get more information about poisonings and toxins in ruminants. With this, I again thank all the participants for patiently listening to me, and I hope I have been able to add into your knowledge. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Abdul Samad sir, for your nice presentation and really great information, and hope that will help all the veterinarians, those are working in the field.
Sir, we are having some questions here.
Sure.
Sir, we are having some questions from participants, sir.
Sure.
Yes. So I have some. Yes, Dr. Upendra Gaikwad, you have noted the question, so you can go ahead. You can ask.
Sir, there is a Dr. Rajendra Gujarati. He asks that, can we give diuretics in onion poisoning?
In onion?
Hello?
In onion poisoning?
Onion poisoning. Yes, sir.
You see, as I have said, I'll go back to. Okay. In case of onion poisoning, there is hemoglobinuria. So if you find that there is hemoglobinuria because of hemolytic anemia. Now, in this, what will happen? Hemoglobin, will be clogging the glomeruli because it is hemolytic anemia, and therefore here you can give diuretic along with lots of fluids, because Here you want to have diuresis to clear off the nephrons. So yes, you can give diuretic along with lots of fluids, isotonic fluid.
Yes. Sir, again, one more question is there from Akash Jadhav.
Hmm.
Sir, he says that he has seen many vets use antibiotics and steroids in poisoning cases.
Hmm.
Is that necessary?
I don't think no use of antibiotic is necessary because you are not having any infection. But if you feel that there is chronic toxicity, and because of chronic toxicity there is some kind of secondary infection, then you might think of antibiotic, but I wouldn't include that in my standard protocol. Number two, as I have already said, corticosteroid, I am always very careful in using corticosteroids, and I generally give corticosteroid only when it is extremely necessary, and I generally don't use it in case of poisonings. Rather than that, I would prefer giving 25% or 50% dextrose, because a lot of these antidotes which we give get potentiated in presence of glucose. And if that is so, you must give 25% and 50% glucose first, and then give those antidotes.
Sir. Sir, again, there is one question. May I take it?
Sure.
Yeah, there is a Krishnamurti Subramaniam. He's asking that what about sugarcane tops feeding? Sugarcane tops feeding regarding to oxalate poisoning.
Okay. Yeah, again same sugarcane tops. I've got two problems. One is it's very rich in saponin, and number two, it is also rich in oxalate. Now, if you're feeding sugarcane tops, in that case, you have to introduce sugarcane tops slowly in the feed. Don't start feeding it at once. So both human is able to take care of saponin. It is also able to take care of oxalate. Whenever you are using sugarcane tops, you should double dose of calcium, because this calcium will be bound to both saponin as well as oxalates. So net availability of calcium will be less. So you have to be very careful that in all those areas where there are sugar factories and people are feeding sugarcane tops, then you can calcium double the quantity. There are people who are also converting sugarcane tops into silage. So there is no harm in feeding sugarcane top, but it should be fed very, very carefully, and you should take into consideration the calcium homeostasis in this case.
Sir, there is Dr. Rajendra Gujarati. He says that he has seen edematous swelling at thigh and perineum region in oxalate poisoning. Is it true?
In chronic poisoning cases, you do get this, and mostly it is because of the calculi. It is because of oxalate crystals that are formed, and usually we see this more common in male because of deposition of fine dust of calcium oxalate. This we have also seen very common in Marathwada area. Bullocks, where you get this perineum. So usually it is because of the oxalate. So you have to you have to take care of the oxalate content of the feed, especially because in case of bullocks we generally don't supplement mineral mixture. So those poor guys are always dependent on whatever they are getting out in the field as fodder. So in those cases we must give some calcium orally, at least dicalcium phosphate can be supplemented.
Sir, there is Sania Tabassum. She asks how much activated charcoal should be given, and is there any side effects giving calcium borogluconate via subcutaneous route?
As far as activated charcoal is concerned, there is no set dose which is given for in case of animals. So whenever I usually give around 100 gram to 150 gram of activated charcoal. But there is one side effect and problem of activated carbon or activated charcoal, that is if the bowel evacuation, if it is not proper, then it starts getting accumulated, and then there is a severe constipation. So that is one problem which you have to take care. So I usually start, giving less of activated carbon initially. But if I find that, there is good defecation, animal is passing feces, so there is no harm because activated carbon will not be absorbed. So that way it is not obnoxious. Now to her second question about calcium, magnesium, borogluconate. I usually find more problems giving IV calcium very rapidly because of cardiac fibrillation. So that is always because then the vets are very on fast route, they want to give it very fast because they want to go and attend to another case. So there is fibrillation. So but as far as subcut is concerned, if you are using a clean needle and if you are disinfecting the skin area properly, then I don't think this calcium borogluconate will have any problem. But don't give a lot of calcium borogluconate at one site. If you want to give half of the calcium borogluconate subcutaneously, I usually divide to 4 sites, 2 on the left side and 2 on the right side, and in divided doses I give subcut. I don't see any. I have never seen problem with this.